Okay, it's Wednesday. It's the 20th, and we're going to be teaching from home today. You'll notice that I am ready to go with the war, ready to start. General Washington has made me a general, so I am the general that is going to be giving you the information that we need to have today. So I don't know how far we're going to go with this today, but just stay with me. If you want to, you can pause me here at any time, and you can also get your notes out, and you can get your PowerPoint out, and if you know how to double screen this, it would probably work out pretty good. So if you double screen it, just push the Windows button and an arrow button, and it'll go either left or right. So, all right, well, let's start here today. And I'm going to be looking at the book here, so I'll be looking down a lot. So don't think I'm not paying attention to you because I am. Okay, we are on page 232, and I think I've already sent that to you. So on page 232, let's start right there. All right. So it talks this, and I have to put my glasses on because I can't see. I can't see. About 1,200 loyalists were killed, it says, injured, taken prisoner during a fierce fight on top of Kings Mountain. This was in South Carolina in 1780. James Collin, a 16-year-old patriot soldier, he recalled it this way. He says, "We soon attempted to climb the hill, but were fiercely charged upon and forced to fall back. We tried a second time. We took the hill a third time, and the enemy finally gave way." Almost exactly what happened at Bunker Hill, but in the opposite, isn't it? With the capture of Kings Mountain, the Patriots scored a needed victory for the Americans in the South. So we're talking today about the South going into the war. All we've ever talked about is what's happening in Massachusetts and Boston and areas around there. And now we're looking at the South. Remember what I told you before? They didn't seem that things were very important until it started happening to them. And now it's happening to them, and they feel it's very important. Very important what's happening. So until 1778, nothing really happened in the South. Not really. Nothing's really happening. So we're going to take a look at the revolution here in the South. During the first 3 years of the American Revolution, the primary and military encounters were always in the North. They were always in the North. One exception, of course, was in 1776 when General Henry Clinton sailed south to attack Charleston, South Carolina. That was in 1776. And they hadn't been back yet? Well, not a force like this. So this ended in a humiliating defeat for the British in 1776 when he went down there. And the revolutionaries remained in control of the southern colonies for the next 3 years. For the next 3 years. So 1779, we see what's going to be happening. Starting in 1778, the British once again turned their attention to the colonies of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and Virginia, where they hoped to regain control with the assistance of some Southern loyalists. There just wasn't enough down there. There just wasn't enough Southern loyalists there to worry about. Washington had a few other things to worry about, though, and these were called traitors. Traitors. We've heard an awful lot about traitors, even lately in our own news. Traitors. People that come against him and the cause. And there were many people that would try to come against him and the cause. We already saw, we were watching The Crossing, how General Gates came against him, how General Lee came against him. Because why? Because they wanted that power and they wanted the ability to be able to take control of something that they didn't have. Power, control, envy, greed, whatever you want to call it, it's no good because it leads to being a traitor against our own General George Washington. General Washington had agreed to let um, General Arnold, Benedict Arnold, have control of West Point on June 20th, 29th of 1780. Now, why would he do that? Well, you realize that General Benedict Arnold was a great general. He really was. He was a heck of a fighter. And he had wounded his leg again in that Battle of Saratoga, where they wanted to cut it off. Well, he finally recuperated, and leg never really healed right. I mean, he always had a limp with it. He was always in pain with it. He knew he could never be in the front lines again, but he still wanted a commission. Washington made him, I believe, a major general. He said, I want to give you a command of West Point. West Point, up in New York in that area, was a very strategic place. And he said, I want you to man it, take care of it, and you be supreme commander there until maybe I can find you something else to do. So Arnold did it. He did it. Now, Arnold was married to a lady named Peggy Shipton. And Peggy Shipton's families were Tories, of all things. She worked on that man. She worked on him a lot to get him to start changing his mind. Because you see, Benedict Arnold was in a lot of debt, and the Continental Army wasn't really paying a lot of money, if any money at all. And they owed him a lot of money. They owed him a lot of debt, to tell you the truth. They owed him a lot, more than money. They owed him a lot of gratitude, really. And he never got it. And so she played on him with these ideas that, don't you think the British are going to win anyway? And when they do, you're going to be on the wrong side. And then what will happen to us? Why don't you join the other side? They'll give you money. They'll give you a rank. Before you know it, you'll be a general. You'll be back on the field again. And we'll be sitting good because once the war's over, we can go back to England or maybe even get some land here. Sounded too good to be true. But to do this, he would have to go against his old friend, General Washington. Could he do it? Well, he did meet with the British. He met with a couple of them. Um, one was a Colonel Andre, and Colonel Andre was actually the boyfriend of Peggy Shipton before Benedict Arnold. He loved her. He loved her tremendously. She loved him. But she saw the uprising of General Arnold and fell in love with him and married him. It broke Andre's heart. But Andre was pretty sneaky about things. He still sent her letters, and she sent letters back. Talk about treason. Anyway, he offered he offered Benedict Arnold a deal. And the deal was exactly what I just got done telling you. They would give him money. I believe it was $25,000, something like that. And they would make him a general in the British Army. And he would also lead men on the field. Well, he actually would do that. But to get to that point, they needed something from him. They wanted West Point. They wanted West Point. So he made the deal. He sure enough made the deal. And the deal was they would get West Point. They would come in and take it. No problem. He would escape, get on a ship called the Vulture, I believe it is, British ship, go back to England, get his commission, and eventually come back to the States, or come back to this country, or whatever you want to call it here, colonies, with British soldiers and fight against the same men that he led in battle, even at Saratoga. You talk about a traitor. He could have just went away to Canada and been done with it, but no, he actually went on the other side and fought against the very side he led in battle. Can't be much worse than that. If he gets caught, could hang. Could hang. So here's what he does. I'm trying to make it as short as I can. There's a great story about it. Arnold is going to start taking the guard away from West Point, putting the guns away, changing everything. The men were starting to get suspicious. He fluffed it off. So eventually, Arnold is going to offer to surrender West Point for 20,000 pounds, about $30,000. Because of delays in communication, he did not know that his offer to surrender West Point had been accepted until the 24th of August, 1780. Well, Arnold met Washington on July 31st, almost a month before, as Washington was crossing the Hudson at King's Ferry, and Washington suggested that Arnold take command of his troops, his light troops, against the British, his whole left wing in New York. Well, this could have changed a lot of things. This is exactly what he wanted. He wanted the left wing, didn't he? He wanted something. A month earlier, right, he betrayed, Arnold had already betrayed Washington and his movements and plans and the French. So if Arnold would have surrendered West Point, if it would go down the way it would go down, then Washington would have to retreat from his current position in New York, break off his plans to unite with the French, which we've been waiting for a long time, you know that, to attack Clinton in New York. That's what they want to do, get the French to attack Clinton in New York, the French General Rochambeau, and leave the French troops vulnerable in Long Island all by themselves. Clinton could then defeat the French, and that would be the end of the war. That's how serious it got. That's how serious it would get. Well, it came down to this. Andre meets with General Arnold for one last time and says, all right, let's get this all set up. Here's how we're going to do it. Now, he was dressed not as a British officer, but as a commoner in regular clothes, because Arnold told him, you cannot go riding through the woods here in a bright red coat. They're going to kill you. So put these clothes on. He put on regular clothes, and Arnold gave him a note. It was a pass, like you all get a pass. That if he was stopped by anybody, just show him that you're on reconnaissance mission for me. And he signed his name, General Benedict Arnold. So just show him this pass, and he'll let you through. And what did Arnold have? What did Andre have with him? He had all the plans to take down West Point. So on September 23rd, 1780, the Americans stopped. Some patriots stopped Andre, told him to get down off his horse, started searching through his saddlebags and wondering, you look like a pretty well dressed person, especially when you have British boots on. You see, he changed everything, but he didn't change those British made officers' boots, which cost a lot of money. That's what set him off. Well, he gave him the pass. He gave the Patriots a pass. And it showed um, West Point's garrisons and defenses, and everything was signed by Benedict Arnold. They didn't trust him. So they found other papers in his saddlebags. They took them for questioning. And they sent that pass, and they sent that stuff to George Washington. Wow. You see, he put his name down in paper. He put it in print. It's never good to put anything in print that can be used against you later on. And that's exactly what he did. Not only that, he signed his name. He signed his name to it. Well, Arnold would escape because Washington was furious, and he made his way up there with some men. When he came there, he wasn't even stopped. The guards didn't even question because none of them had guns. See, the British could have walked right in. Arnold escaped to enemy lines, later became a brigadier general in the British Army, and he fought against the same men that he had led into battle in Saratoga. He even came to, I think I told you the story where he came to Williamsburg, and he wasn't afraid to show his face in a red British jacket. Well, a lot of things happened to him, and maybe we'll talk more about it when we get back in class, but Arnold goes to England after the war. He dies in June of 1801 from a nervous disease. They don't know if it's Parkinson's disease or something else, but he started to shake quite a bit. He was so distraught because, of course, we know the British lose. His whole idea of being some grand person over in England failed. He wasn't even allowed in the British circles of ex-officers that fought because he really was a traitor to his own country, and they felt he was still a traitor to their country. So he was a man without a country. Too bad. But he wasn't caught, he wasn't hung. They tried to kind of kill himself by having duels with people. And one of the last times he had a duel, it was over something stupid, and the man would not fire. Benedict Arnold fired first, missed on purpose, probably. He wanted the man to kill him. The man shot it in the ground. He said, I will not kill you. He was so mad. So he died of this nervous disease, probably a terrible, terrible death. Probably a terrible death. So, how could he have done it? Greed and envy and power can do a lot of things to a man or a woman. You should never come against friends, country, what's right. And he did absolutely what was wrong. He really did. Are there traitors out there today? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Will they come to light? Who knows? Who knows what will happen in the future? We don't know. All we know is what happened in this time. For sure. Maybe not even everything then. That's why I tell you, it's a real good idea for you to have a little diary and start writing things down, being in eighth grade, because when you're 10 years down the road, you will have the truth of what happened in all this time when you were growing up. History books might not tell you the truth, but you can tell yourself the truth. You'll see it right in front of you. Well, there were other people that fought besides generals and those that had high ranking places. There was a man called Francis Marion. Francis Marion was in South Carolina, and eventually they would call him the Swamp Fox. In South Carolina, there's a lot of swamps in the area, a lot of swamps in the area. And he was kind of like a Ethan Allen. He had his own men, probably anywhere from maybe 20 to 50, maybe not even that. And he would attack supply lines of the British. He would do anything he could to disrupt them. That's what he would do. They could not catch him. Now, in August of 1780, leading a series of successful nighttime guerrilla-style attacks where he would hit them and run against the British supply and communication lines and against small concentrations of British or loyalist soldiers. That's what he would do. That's what he would do. Sometimes he would do things like climb the tallest trees, and what can you see from the tallest trees? Everything. You can see everything. So he would also lead his horses across a bridge. I know horses make a lot of noise going across a wooden bridge. So they lay their blankets down first. And as they crossed, you couldn't hear them. They walked across. And they would attack the British lines. And then they would run across. Didn't matter back then. So hit and run tactics, very sneaky. Very sneaky. Started to get the British really upset. And they called him the Swamp Fox because he would hide in the swamps and they would meet in the swamps. And the British didn't know where the swamps were. They had no idea where he was. And if they did, they wouldn't go in there after him. It was too dangerous. Frustrated people like Bannister Tarleton, Colonel Bannister Tarleton. Bannister Tarleton had a cavalry group called the um, oh my goodness, I can't think of the name right now. They were very, very rough, and they were the kind of people that would cut you down in a minute. I remember now they were called dragoons. They were called dragoons, and they had these long swords. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to go get a sword and show you what the swords look like. Hold on just for a second. I had to go get one of these swords so you can see it. This is a cavalry sword. See how it's curved? Like this? All right. This is an 1840 wrist breaker, but Their swords were just about like this, maybe a little bit more curved. It's sharp on this end, like a razor sharp. Okay, this side is not, but you can see how it's curved. All right, they come riding at you like this on a 1,200-pound horse. You better get out of the way. If the sword don't get you, the horse will, right? So I had to just show you that. Let me put it down so I don't break anything. Bannister Tarleton wanted the swamp fox real bad. He really did, because he kept interrupting his group all the time, and he did some pretty horrible things to find out where he was. Some pretty horrible things. Killed people even to find out the answers. Sometimes even burned people in their own houses. Now you might say that didn't happen. Yeah, it did happen. There was witnesses to it. Our seventh president, Andrew Jackson, was actually a boy, about 14 at the time. Him and his brother were taken captive by the British because they were in a militia fighting for the Patriots. His brother would die of a disease in prison, his mother too. Um, and he would get out, but he was slashed on his face by one of those swords because he would refused to clean the boots of a British officer. Don't tell me they didn't come against kids. They did. Your age, too. He was 14 years old. There's a story about it. Now, this Bannister Tarleton, we'll talk more about him when we get back in school, hopefully this week. He knew that Swamp Fox was out there, but he didn't know his real name. He didn't. He couldn't find his real name out. He never did find his name out, that it was Francis Marion, because Marion had been very deceptive. So in December of 1780, he was promoted to a brigadier general under Nathaniel Greene. I'm talking about Francis Marion was. And they fought in this battle called Cowpens. Cowpens. And guess who was in charge of the British side for Cowpens? Bannister Tarleton. Bannister Tarleton. Now, there's a real cool story about that, too. What happened? So, General Daniel Morgan, remember Daniel Morgan was caught up in Quebec when Montgomery and Benedict Arnold were up there, and Daniel Morgan was one of those that was captured. He was a colonel then. Well, now he's a general. General Daniel Morgan and General Nathaniel Greene won battles in the South. Morgan defeated the British in 1781 at this battle called Cowpens. Now, here's how it ties into Washington. Was Washington there? No, he wasn't there. But Colonel William Washington, uh, General Washington's cousin, was there. And he raced ahead of his cavalry. We're talking with horses. He raced ahead of his cavalry. He dueled hand to hand with, guess who? Bannister Tarleton. Yes, he did. Bannister Tarleton. And he cut two of his fingers off. Tarleton lost two fingers. I don't know which ones. But you know that guard around the sword there, let me show you. That guard is supposed to protect you right here. But it only protects you so far. So he must have got him right here somehow. Didn't get him here. Must have got him right here. And he got two of them fingers. Oh well, got your hand in a place not supposed to be. Washington's life was saved. Talking about Colonel Washington's life was saved only when a young bugler fired a pistol that he had taken off an Englishman when another Englishman went to raise a saber against Washington. So Washington was about ready to get hit with one of them sabers, and the young bugler fired a gun and killed him. Saved his life. Wow, how about that? So the Battle of Cowpens was a big battle. It was a very important battle, a Battle of Cowpens. Now there's this other battle that was called the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. Now in your book, I want you to turn to this page here because there's a picture of this man I want you to see. Page 234, there's a picture of him. There's a map there, and there's a picture of this man. He looks like a big man. This is when he was older because he actually lived to be older. But listen to this Peter Francisco and who this man was. I'm going to read it out of the book because it actually gives me a better description of him than I had. Let's take a look at this. There's a monument at Guilford Courthouse. Now, Guilford Courthouse, this is just this courthouse. That's the name of the town. I don't know why they call it that, but they do. Like they call Appomattox Courthouse. Um, it's a town, but we think it's just a courthouse. And anyway, there's a monument at Guilford Courthouse. It marks the site of a charge that was made during his famous battle that was fought there. The monument's known as the Francisco Monument. Born into Portuguese Azores, that's where the place was, this young boy named Peter Francisco was taken from his family and abandoned on a dock in Virginia. There's a whole story behind it, and I'm not going to tell it to you. I'm going to show it to you when we get back because it's told by one of his relatives. Nobody can tell a story better than a relative can. So I'm going to let him tell you the real story about it. But imagine this boy was taken from his home, was from a ship, and left on a dock in Virginia. All right, when the revolution began, 16-year-old Francisco joined up with the Virginia militia. He fought in a lot of battles. 16 years old? Well, he wasn't just your average 16-year-old. Most accounts indicated he was quite large. 6'6", 260 pounds. That's a lineman. Well, maybe a fullback. I'm not sure. But that's a big boy. 6'6", 260 pounds at 16 years old. Wow. Anyway, they had to make a special sword for him because these little swords that we had here were not big enough. He could carry one bigger. Well, armed with this huge sword, he killed 11 British that day. 11, until he was bayoneted by a British rifle. Um, maybe once, maybe twice. Francisco collapsed, and they left him for dead on the battlefield. But guess what? He wasn't dead. He wasn't dead. He was hurt bad, but he was recovered, and it would take him a while to recover, but he would eventually join up with his men again in 1781, the Battle of Yorktown, not too far from there. Battle of Yorktown. Wow. So wait to get back and hear this story. I'm not even going to send it online. I got to show it to you in person because you got to see it. You got to see this story of Peter Francisco. It's an amazing thing. All right. At this battle, anyway, General Greene, he was in charge, and he used tactics just like Francis Marion, the swamp fox, hit and run tactics. He says, we fight, we get beat, we rise, and we fight again. And that's exactly what he did. So Greene and Morgan will eventually join forces on March 15th, 1781, in North Carolina, hoping to beat British General Charles Cornwallis. Yeah, that's the same Cornwallis that was coming against Washington. Americans were beat badly here. They were beat badly. All right, not a good sign there. But like I said, we did have people like Peter Francisco helping out. We had an awful lot of different people that fought in the war here. A lot of different people fought in the war, and African Americans fought in this war. Now you might think, no, they didn't. They absolutely did, and not as slaves. Not as slaves. George Washington offered them freedom if they would fight for 12 months. 12 months. Now, the British had offered the same thing. Remember, I told you the story what Benedict Arnold had offered them. The British offered African American slaves to fight for them to have freedom, and nearly 1,000 joined. Nearly 1,000 joined. Some, though, had no choice to join. They joined at the end of a bayonet. In other words, you join or you die right now. They needed men, and they figured these men could fight just as well as anybody else. Some even became Hessians. How can you become a Hessian? But they did. They fought with them. Some they used as laborers, like slaves. Some they did. Now, Americans saw that this was becoming very popular with the African American people here because they, of course, wanted to be free, and British are offering them freedom. So that's when the Americans offered them the same deal African Americans been fighting since the beginning of the war. If you fight for 12 months, the men were set free. A lot of them stayed. A lot stayed. Even after the 12 months, they stayed. Why not? Well, had George Washington been less, and here's a word for it, ambivalent, in other words, cautious, more blacks might have participated um, on the Patriot side than with the Loyalists at an earlier time. He could have. He was kind of caught in some politics where they didn't feel that slaves or any black man would be worth fighting with. Could they trust them? And you got to realize this is the 1700s. Could they trust them? After being slaves all this time, would they turn on the white man and just shoot them? We did have Native Americans fight with us, and there were some Hispanics fighting with us. We know that from Bernardo de Galvez, Spanish were fighting. Why not the blacks? Well, when he took command of the Army, Continental Army in 1775, Washington barred the further recruitment of any black soldiers. They had already been recruiting black soldiers because a lot of people had signed over the papers of their slaves to the Continental Army and they would fight with them. Then this would happen. Despite the fact they had fought side by side with their white counterparts at places like Lexington and Concord, Bunker Hill. I mean, come on, these guys already been fighting. You put a gun in a guy's hand, and a guy's a guy. It doesn't matter what color you are. They got to fight, and they did. So by the winter of 1777 and 1778, remember that was bad, where a lot of soldiers would die at Valley Forge. The army was down to about 18,000 men from disease and desertion, and guys not coming back, not getting paid. This, together with the active recruitment of now enslaved blacks by the British, finally convinced Washington that we have to do something, and he approved for 2 regiments of free blacks and slaves in Rhode Island. Now, in that painting with Ray, I'm going to show you when we get back. There is a medallion on the bridle of that horse that shows the Rhode Island Regiment of blacks, soldiers, and they were good soldiers. They didn't see a lot of action, but they did see some action. It just goes to show that the African American in search for freedom from slavery joined up on both sides during this revolution. Would you? I know I would. I know I would. If I was a slave, first thing I want to do is get free. Is get free. First thing I want to do. And what's it going to take to get free? Do I got to fight? Then I'm going to fight. Do whatever I have to do. I just want freedom. That's what they did. So, as a result of the revolution, the population of free blacks in the United States increased from about 25,000 in 1776 to nearly 60,000 when the first federal census was taken in 1790. Free, free African Americans, free people, free. Not everybody was a slave by the time the Civil War would come around. There's an awful lot of free people. So, contrary to what some people were trying to say out there about the 1619 project that United States started for slavery and the revolution was fought for to keep slavery, is wrong. It is wrong. We fought for freedom. And even by this motion, we fought for freedom for all colors. For all colors. Now, would some go back into slavery afterwards? They did. Yes, they did. I'm not saying no, they didn't. They did. But it was a step in the right direction. It sure was. You had more free blacks after that war than ever before. Ever before. Eventually, by the time you would get around to 1860, there would be upwards to almost 300,000 free blacks in the country. So that's something to think about, isn't it? It really is. Now, many thousands of African Americans who did aid the British, they lost their freedom anyway. Well, how's that? Because many of them ended up in slavery in the Caribbean. The British didn't want them back. They weren't going back to England with them. No, they could put them on a boat, all right down the Caribbean and sold them into slavery. Well, I thought the British were done with slavery. Well, they were, but they sold them to somebody else. That's all. You don't have to have slaves, but you can sell slaves. That's exactly what they did. Others, when they attempted to leave the British in places like Charleston and Savannah, were prevented. And there were incredible letters that had been written by Southerners of Africans after the siege of Charleston and what they happened, swimming out to the boats, they said, and trying to get on the British boats that were getting on the big ships, and the officers hacking at them with their cutlass. In other words, their swords, saying, "Get away from us. You're not part of us." A lot of them died out there. They drowned or they got hacked to pieces. They weren't going to go back. It was a very tragic situation. And of the many thousands of Africans who left the plantation, not many of them actually got their freedom. They had nowhere to go. And they went back. They went back into slavery because they had nowhere else to go, especially if they had fought for the British. Now who wants them? And that went with the loyalists too. Just it wasn't with the blacks, it was with the loyalists too. So let me give you a couple, and you'll see on your PowerPoint that did serve and served well. James Armistead was a spy. These were all black men. Caesar Bacon, Cuff Whitmore, Peter Salem, Salem Poor fought at Bunker Hill. Crispus Attucks died during the Boston Massacre. There's a portrait that I'm showing you there. It's of a Revolutionary War soldier in a naval uniform. He's black. Painted in oil somewhere around 1780. It proves that they were in service to the Patriots. And he doesn't look like he's a slave. He's in a nice uh, naval uniform. Things are never always as they seem. They never are they? Now, there's another whole group of people that we didn't even get a chance to talk about. That's women. Oh, yes. Women had a very big part in this war. Well, maybe not as big as maybe some of the generals and the guys out there fighting on the battlefield, but they were fighting all right because many women took on the responsibility of, first of all, running businesses and farms while their husbands were away. They had to keep life going. Life didn't stop for everybody because the war was going on. They had to keep going and doing things that they normally would do to survive and to provide for their families. Now, others followed in their husbands to camp. A lot of them did. They followed their husbands to camp and they cooked and they sewed and they carried ammunition. They served as nurses. They did whatever they could. They made bandages. They made bullets, ammunition. It's just amazing some of the things these women did. Now, I'm sure a lot of the guys didn't want their wives with them up front like that. They could get hurt. Some of the women were pretty tough. A lot of times they just stayed in camp or they followed the camp and they would wait till the men come back, if they did. But it was some of these guys that benefited because their wives or other women were there to take care of them, especially when they were wounded. Some of these women made soap, which I don't know how many of these guys actually used the soap. But they made soap, or they made clothes. Um, they made bandages, like I said. They melted down their own pewter pots and cups and pitchers for bullets. So they were making bullets, and they were making cartridges which had gunpowder in it with a bullet on top. There was one lady, and I want you to write this down. Her name was Mary Ludwig Hayes Macaulay. Mary Ludwig Hayes Macaulay. Wow. She spent 7 years with her husband on a cannon crew, side by side with them. Now, she wasn't firing a cannon. She was getting the water. They called her the Moll of the Pitcher. So her name became Molly Pitcher. Now, her name was Mary Ludwig Hayes Macaulay. And there's a great story about her. The soldiers called her Molly Pitcher because she always brought them water, and she brought water to cool the cannon down. That was her job. She also helped wounded men and assisted a lot with whatever the men needed around that cannon area. If she needed to go get ammunition, she'd go get ammunition. Like I said, she got water to cool it off with. Whatever needed to be done, she got it done. But she watched all that time. 7 years she was watching how these men were loading and firing this cannon. Well, during a New Jersey battle, her husband was wounded, wasn't killed, and she took his place beside him, beside the cannon. She said, I can do this. She did. And she kept firing and firing and firing that cannon. She was a hero. She did. She learned exactly what she needed to do. And so much so, she's on the front of your book. Here she is right here. That's Molly Pitcher. See her husband laying there, wounded? I'm sure she took care of him. The men were glad to have her. She went on and continued to be on that cannon crew until he got better, which probably would have been a while. I don't know how bad he was hurt. Now, after the war, the government recognized the service of Mary McCauley, or Molly Pitcher, we want to call her, and awarded her a pension of $50 a year. Now you got to realize this was 40 years after the war. 40 years? 40 years after the war. So $50 a year. Finally, 40 years after the war, she gets her first paycheck. She died a year later. That's that's bad timing. Well, what about all the 40 years that they wasted? Shouldn't she get payback for all that 40 years? So add that up. $50 a year for 40 years. How much is that? She didn't get a penny of it. No, she didn't. But she probably got the first $50. And once she died, well, there goes another pension. It's gone. Poor Molly Pitcher. And her family, too. I'm sure they were counting on that money. Now, here's some of the things the other women did, and they were spies. And we talked a little bit about that. And there's a couple I want you to go ahead and write these down. Lydia Dara was a spy. And Lydia Dara was a spy for the Continental Army, serving messages to General Washington under the buttons of her son. So you see these buttons? These are metal buttons, but sometimes, and some of you know, there's buttons that have a cloth over top. And she would take the cloth off the button, put the message underneath the cloth, and put the cloth back on the button, send her son down to Continentals. He would take that button off and get the message. Pretty slick, huh? Pretty slick. Who would ever think that? I don't know how many times she could do that, but she did it and before she got caught. She never did get caught. Another one was Mercy Otis Warren. Mercy Otis Warren was a newspaper reporter that wrote in support of the revolution. A lot of guts to do that because sometimes the British would try to shut that down or the Loyalists would try to shut that down. Even more, the Tories would try to shut it down and maybe even try to burn down your printing press. But she still wrote. She still wrote. Now, how could she be a spy? Well, she could also give messages, send messages, give messages through her writings in the newspaper. But she was a supporter. Yes, she was. She was finding out all kinds of things and putting them down in her newspapers. I'm sure there was some underground newspapers, committees of correspondence going on, and I'm sure she was part of that. Another one is Patience Wright. She led messages. She hid messages, I'm sorry, in sculptures that she would have to mark because she lived in England. Wow. She sent these sculptures to America from England. And she would hide a message in one of the sculptures. Now, should you put an X on the bottom of one of them or maybe mark one with a little different type of a mark? And they would have to break that sculpture, get the message out. It took a lot of boldness because if she ever got caught, she'd been killed. Now, all these women, if they would get caught, they would be hung. You mean they would hang women? Yes, they would hang women. You know, they hung a lot of women during the Salem witch trial. If you're a spy, woman or man, you're hung. Here's a couple more. Sarah Bradley Fulton. Now, sometimes called the mother of the Boston Tea Party. Why is that? She delivered dispatches through enemy lines during this time. She was delivering dispatches through enemy lines. Who would suspect a woman? Nobody does. Nobody does, because a woman would never stoop so low as to be a spy. Well, these women did. They were helping the cause. They hated the British. They hated how the British acted. They hated how the way the British treated us. Emily Geiger was another one, and she rode 50 miles through British and Tory enemy territory to deliver a message to General Sumter. I believe she's only 16 years old when she did that. 16 years old. And she rode all that way through there without stopping. Amazing. So you might be thinking, well, I'm only 14. What can I do? If you were there back in that time, there's a lot that you could have done. A lot. They needed every person, boy, girl, man, woman, for this cause of freedom. Maybe it's like that today. This cause of freedom is important. Now, there's a couple other things I have on here, and I'll share them with you. It's about hiding messages in places like a quill. Okay, quill's just a feather. Sometimes they would roll the message up and shove it up inside that quill. Never see it. You never see it. They would also use things called invisible ink. Invisible ink, right? And invisible ink, um, you can even ask the science teacher. You ask, can invisible ink be a real thing? Well, it was a real thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here for today because it's already 47 minutes. And I'm hopefully going to be meeting you back in class. So remember all we've done. Go back through this again. Some of the things I showed you on your PowerPoints here, and you have all the notes. All you have to do is highlight things that seem to be important. We're going to get back together, and we're going to go over this last part of talking about the spies. And I want to show you some things about invisible ink. Some of the ways the British had their own spies out there. It wasn't just us. Oh no. British had their own spies. So did the French. So until we meet again, me and General Washington up here, we'll be seeing you soon.